You always assumed the nicest person in the room couldn't be the most dangerous one. What if that assumption is exactly what they're counting on? Let me paint you a picture. Think about someone you once knew, or maybe someone you know right now. They were universally liked. People lit up when they walked in. They always said the right things at the right moment. They never raised their voice. Never made a scene. On the surface, they looked like the most emotionally intelligent person in your life. But here's what nobody else saw. Every time you left a conversation with them, something felt off. Not wrong in a way you could point to. Not wrong in a way you could describe to a friend without sounding paranoid. Just hollowed out. Like something had been quietly taken from you and you didn't catch the moment it happened. You felt vaguely ashamed, slightly confused, and completely unable to explain why. There was no blow-up, no name-calling, no obvious cruelty. Just a quiet, persistent wrongness you couldn't name. And because you couldn't name it, you turned the confusion back on yourself. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I'm reading into it. Maybe I'm the problem. That right there, that self-doubt spiral, is not a coincidence. That is the system working exactly as designed. So here is the question this video is built around. What if the most dangerous person in your life is the one nobody ever suspects? What if the most harmful dynamic you've ever been in looked, from the outside, completely fine? Let's talk about covert narcissism. And let's go sign by sign. Before we get into the signs, a quick but important reframe. When most people hear the word narcissist, they picture someone loud, domineering. Someone who walks into a room and immediately makes it about themselves. Someone who brags, belittles openly, and expects to be treated like royalty. That's the version we've seen dramatized in movies, in office villain archetypes, in pop psychology shorthand. But that version? It's actually easier to identify. Easier to name. Easier to leave. The covert version operates on an entirely different frequency. Covert narcissistic behavior doesn't announce itself. It doesn't dominate rooms, it infiltrates trust. It hides behind humility, sensitivity, and victimhood. It weaponizes the very traits we associate with emotional maturity, vulnerability, self-awareness, concern for others, and uses them as tools of control. The person exhibiting these behaviors often appears, to everyone watching, to be the most emotionally sophisticated person in the dynamic. Which is precisely what makes the damage so disorienting and so hard to recover from. You're not dealing with someone who insults you to your face. You're dealing with someone who makes you insult yourself. Keep that in mind as we go through each sign. These aren't random personality quirks. As you'll see, they form a pattern, and that pattern has a purpose. Sign 1. The perpetual victim who always escapes accountability. Picture this. You finally work up the courage to say something. You tell this person, calmly, carefully, that something they did hurt you. Maybe you rehearsed it. Maybe it took weeks to get to this conversation. And before you can even finish your sentence, the shift happens. Suddenly, they're the one who's been suffering. They talk about their childhood, their anxiety, how hard things have been lately, how nobody truly understands what they're carrying. By the end of the conversation, you're not the person who was hurt anymore, you're the person who made them feel worse by bringing it up. You end the conversation apologizing for something they did. This is the covert narcissist's most elegant move, an endless, on-demand supply of suffering that surfaces with surgical precision whenever accountability comes near. It's not that their pain isn't real. It's that it functions as a deflection system. Every attempt you make to address harm gets absorbed into their greater pain, and your need for acknowledgement gets quietly buried under the weight of their narrative. The cruelest part? You feel guilty for even having tried. Because they're so clearly struggling. How could you make this about you? That's exactly what you were supposed to feel. Sign 2. Passive aggression dressed as sensitivity. They never say they're angry. Let's be clear about that. Anger would be too direct. Too readable. Too easy to name. Instead, a sigh that lands just a half second too heavy. A withdrawal that is just noticeable enough to make your stomach drop. A comment, framed as a joke, delivered with a small smile, that hits somewhere specific and doesn't quite let go. And when you react to any of it, when you gently say, "Hey, that stung," the the script flips. I was just being honest. You're so sensitive. I didn't mean it that way. I can't say anything around you. Now look at what just happened. They delivered something barbed. You responded to the sting. And somehow you are the one with the problem. Your sensitivity is now the issue. Your reaction has become the thing being discussed, not whatever prompted it. Over time, this teaches you something. You learn to monitor yourself around someone who claims to be the fragile one. You start swallowing your reactions before they surface. You walk on eggshells, not because this person is visibly volatile, but because you've learned, through repetition, that your emotional responses will always be the thing that gets scrutinized. Theirs will not. This is emotional conditioning. And it happens so gradually, so quietly, that most people don't notice until they're already deep inside it. Sign 3. The quiet superiority complex. This one is almost invisible because it wears the face of concern. Unlike the overt version, which might brag about accomplishments, dismiss others openly, or demand obvious deference, the covert version signals superiority through subtle observations. Delivered gently. Delivered with what looks like care. I just worry you're not thinking this through. Not everyone has the emotional depth to really understand this kind of thing. I mean, you could try it that way. I just know how these things usually end. None of these are compliments. But none of them are obviously insults either. They exist in that precise middle space where the message gets delivered but the delivery can always be denied. Think about a close friend. The kind who seemed supportive on the surface. Who showed up for you in visible ways. But who also, somehow, always found a way to make you feel subtly less than in private. Not through cruelty. Through a particular kind of phrasing that left you feeling like you needed them to navigate the world competently. Like without their guidance, you'd probably stumble. That is not support. That is dependence being manufactured. The superiority isn't about bragging. It's about positioning. And the position they want is indispensable. Slightly above you. Just enough that you keep looking to them for validation, which they can then ration however they choose. Sign 4. Envy disguised as concern. This one is particularly painful to recognize because it's wrapped in something that feels like love. They celebrate your wins publicly. In front of others, they're your biggest supporter. They'll share your good news, toast to your success, tell everyone how proud they are of you. But privately? Something else happens. Privately, they ask questions that plant seeds of doubt. Are you sure you're ready for that? I just want to make sure you're not setting yourself up to fail. I mean, that's exciting. I just hope it works out the way you're imagining. None of these things sounds like envy. They sound like someone looking out for you. Someone who cares enough to be honest when others won't be. But watch what these questions actually do. They take a moment where you felt confident and introduce uncertainty. They take your excitement and add just enough weight to it that it starts to sag. Over time, when something good happens to you, your first instinct isn't joy. It's to brace for the quiet undermining that's coming. The envy is never named. It never shows up as bitterness or competitiveness in any way you could point to. It hides, perfectly, inside the costume of caring. And because it looks like concern, you thank them for it. You take the doubt they've handed you and call it wisdom. This is how they keep you small. Not through cruelty. Through counterfeit caution. Sign 5. Selective memory and manufactured confusion. You remember something clearly. You were there. You know what happened. But when you bring it up, something shifts. That's not how that went. I never said that. You always misinterpret things. You do this every time. And here's what makes this particular sign so effective. They don't deliver it dramatically. They don't get defensive or loud. They deliver it calmly. Reasonably. With a kind of patient exasperation, like they've explained this to you before and they're trying to remain gentle despite your continued confusion. That calm is strategic. Because if they yelled, you might get defensive. You might push back. But when they say it with a sigh and a measured tone, the doubt creeps in instead. Maybe I am misremembering. Maybe I do always misinterpret. Maybe my memory isn't reliable. This is gaslighting, but without the theatrics we typically associate with the word. It's not explosive. It's methodical. It operates by introducing just enough uncertainty into your recollection that you start to distrust your own perception of reality. And the memory they're selectively rewriting? It's never random. It's always the memory that would hold them accountable. The harmful thing they said. The promise they broke. The moment you caught them in something. That's the one that gets rewritten. Over time, you stop trusting your own account of events. You stop bringing things up because you're not sure anymore. And a person who can't trust their own memory is a person who can't build a case. That's not a side effect of their confusion. That is the goal. Sign 6. Emotional withholding as punishment. They go cold. Not explosively. Not in a way that gives you something to point to. Just distant. A degree cooler. The warmth that was there yesterday is slightly rationed today, and you don't know why, and they won't tell you why, because telling you would mean admitting that something is being withheld on purpose. So you search. You replay the last few conversations trying to identify what you did. You soften your tone. You try a little harder. You reach out. You modify your behavior in small, almost unconscious ways, shrinking yourself, walking more carefully, tuning yourself to their emotional frequency in hopes that the warmth comes back. And eventually, it does. Just enough. Just enough to confirm that your effort worked, that connection is possible, that you just have to stay attuned enough to keep it. This is a cycle. And it's one of the most powerful conditioning mechanisms in any controlling dynamic. Warmth becomes a reward. Coldness becomes a signal that you've done something wrong. You never know exactly what, which means you're always monitoring, always adjusting, always trying to earn something that should never have required earning in the first place. The punishment is never named. There's no confrontation, no explanation, just withdrawal. And the silence is loud enough to change your behavior without a single word ever being said. Now let's talk about what these 6 signs actually are. Look at them together. The perpetual victim, the passive aggression, the quiet superiority, the envy in disguise, the selective memory, the emotional withholding. At first glance, these might look like separate personality quirks. Like a person who's just a little difficult, a little insecure, a little hard to read. But that reading misses the architecture. Every single one of these behaviors accomplishes the same thing. They make you the problem. The person with too many feelings. The one who misremembers. The one who's too sensitive. The one who needs to do better, try harder, self-correct more vigilantly. The person at the center of all this stays invisible. Often beloved by everyone around them. While you, the person absorbing the dynamic, carry the weight of the dysfunction without being able to explain where it came from or why you feel so depleted. This is not a collection of random behavioral tendencies. This is a system of control. And it operates specifically below the threshold of what most people recognize as abuse, which is exactly why it works for as long as it does. There's no bruise to show. No screaming match to describe. Just a years-long accumulation of interactions that left you feeling less like yourself than you were before, and deeply confused about why. Why these signs are so hard to identify in real time. Here's something important to understand. The fact that you didn't see it sooner is not a failure of your intelligence or your perception. It is evidence of how skillfully the dynamic was constructed. Covert narcissistic behavior is uniquely difficult to identify because it doesn't trigger your threat response the way overt cruelty does. There's no alarm, no obvious boundary being crossed. So the harm accumulates slowly, in increments small enough that each individual moment seems survivable, even dismissible. And here's where it gets psychological. Trauma bonding, the attachment that forms through cycles of tension, withdrawal, and warmth, is not a logical process. It's a neurological one. The intermittent reinforcement of connection and coldness creates an attachment that's often stronger than relationships built on consistent warmth. You don't bond in spite of the pain. Sometimes you bond because of the pattern the pain creates. Cognitive dissonance does the rest. You hold 2 things simultaneously. This person is causing me harm, and this person loves me and means well. Because those 2 things can't both be true, and because the harm is hard to prove and the love is easy to see, your mind resolves the conflict by questioning the harm. Maybe I'm imagining it. Maybe I'm being unfair. This is the specific confusion that covert dynamics create. You feel bad but you can't explain why. You doubt yourself but you can't find concrete evidence. You want to create distance but you feel guilty for even considering it. You love them. You miss the version of them that showed up during the warm phases. You wonder if something you're doing is making things worse. I want you to hear this clearly. That confusion, that specific, circular, exhausting confusion, is not a side effect of the dynamic. It is the intended effect. The system is working exactly as designed when you can't tell whether the problem is them or you. Because a person who can't locate the source of their pain can't effectively protect themselves from it. If you recognized yourself in any of this, I want to speak directly to you now. If something in this video made your chest tighten, if you found yourself nodding at a specific sign and thinking of a specific face, if you felt, for the first time or the 100th time, that particular mixture of recognition and grief, I want you to know something. You're not crazy. You were not too sensitive. You did not misremember. You were not imagining it. You were targeted by someone who was exceptionally skilled at making you feel exactly that way. And the fact that you couldn't name it while you were inside it doesn't mean you failed. It means you were dealing with something specifically designed to stay below the level of naming. Recognizing the pattern is not a small thing. It is the beginning, not just intellectually, but at the level of your nervous system, which has been trained over time to doubt its own signals. Rebuilding trust in your own perception, trusting your body's memory even when your mind has been worked over to question it, that is real work. And it starts exactly here with recognition. Your gut has been trying to tell you something for longer than you realize. It knew before your mind could form the words. Trust that. If one of these 6 signs hit closer to home than the others, if you lived inside it for months or years without having a name for it, I want you to drop it in the comments. Not to perform pain, but because naming it out loud, even in a comment section, is part of how you start to reclaim the story. And because someone else is going to read what you write and feel less alone. That matters. If this kind of content helps you make sense of your experience, subscribe. Not because of an algorithm, but because this channel is built around one thing, giving you the psychological clarity to understand what happened to you so you can stop carrying it as a mystery and start carrying it as something you've named, understood, and are moving through. You are not the problem. You were never the problem. And now you have the language to know the difference.